Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my development diary for the game Stormbreak. In this episode I'm going to go on a little bit about emotion, not just the character's emotions, but the emotions that the player is supposed to feel or that I'm trying to invoke in the player, and how that relates to, say, the music of the game and all that kind of stuff. So let's jump into this. Now here I am on the test bed map, and we'll go and talk to this character a little bit. Now, something Amy. That's not a right name to have there. His name's not Amy. Whatever. Now, one of the things I realized back when I first started making this game was that I was going to be very limited in what I was going to be capable of doing. I do have some experience doing 3D modeling and programming and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is I am just one person, and although I imagine it is possible for me to simply persevere through the development of this and dump an enormous amount of time and effort into this, the reality is if I wanted to get this done short of 10 years, I was going to have to be very limited in not only what could be done, but what tools I could use and all that kind of stuff. There was a time in which I had intended to make this kind of like a simplified 3D game, kind of what, it would look a little bit like an N64 game or all that kind of stuff. And that wouldn't have been terribly difficult, and I started creating some models for that, and I was working in Unity a little bit, but it wasn't really turning out the way I wanted to. Although I did like the idea of being able to animate the characters, there wasn't enough emotion in the characters or anything like that. So I took a look at the RPG Maker, and this is what I decided to work with. But even then, this system is pretty limited. For example, the characters are small on the screen. It's blown up in your screen. It's actually pretty small on my monitor right now. But the characters are small. They don't have much in the way of animations. I mean, I could give them animations, but you wouldn't be able to tell like what kind of emotions they're having without weird like emoticon bubbles over their heads. So I decided to go with the portrait bust set up here on the left side during the dialogue, and have different portraits appear depending on the emotions of the character. For example, Ansel here, says Amy, this is the standard bust that will appear while he is talking. Majority of the time this is what you're going to see. When he's happy or agitated or whatever, it will look different. For example, he's angry now, and his proper name appeared. His fist is clenched, his mouth is open, his eyebrows are like furrowed a little bit. He's clearly more angry. And this is the kind of thing that I felt was really necessary. One of the reasons why I liked the game Xenogears was because they had the portraits on the side showing you the face of the characters. You couldn't really see what the characters looked like too well from their character sprites. Games like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, although they had some level of emotion that they can convey through the character animations, you couldn't really see their faces too well, and that was kind of a limiting factor. So this is what I'm trying to do to avoid that. Of course, Ansel is not the only character in which this kind of thing is happening with. All of the major characters are going to have multiple faces in which to show. Kira, standard face. Shocked, not that big of a difference. She's happy, she's smiling, not that huge of a difference, but subtle. I think it's effective. I may be wrong about that. And she has a headache. Annabelle, standard face. Not really showing any emotion there. Ouch! She must have taken a hit to the head or something like that. All the characters have happy, sad, angry, shocked, injured, all that kind of stuff. Some characters have even more than that, depending on the need on what they need to have the character do. For example, I don't have it set up here to show you, but Ambrose, one of the lead characters, has a certain scene where instead of just a typical I'm angry look, because the character of Ambrose doesn't really get angry, he has a move where he's holding his sword out to the side, showing that he's ready for a fight rather than simply angry. Okay, another one of the things that is extraordinarily important, I think, for this kind of game, and especially one where I'm not really going to be able to do a lot of expressive emotion with the characters, is the music. Now, this isn't really related so much to the emotions of the characters, so much as it is kind of trying to, haha, look at that, I didn't know I could do that. Not that it matters anyway, it's just a test map, debug screen. Trying to invoke emotions in the player as opposed to the characters, and you see a lot of this going on, especially like in, well, it's always been the case in video games where they've had music ever since, well, not maybe so much the Atari 2600 or anything like that, but since then. And like, it's been especially important in the role-playing games. It is music. The music has a very strong connection to the to emotions and all that kind of stuff. Now, in this game, what I originally intended to do was to create all of the music in the game, and I was hoping to have maybe like 20 or 30 tracks tailor-suited to the game that would convey whatever emotion that I want to go through, or have the player experience, or have it sort of convey the emotion of the scene while playing the game, and you could hear that. The problem was, I am not a musician. I can play guitar, I can play drums, not very well, I suck, I will admit that. And also, those kinds of instruments are definitely not the sort of musical aesthetic that I wanted to carry into this game anyway. So, using things like the Magic's Music Maker or Sony Acid Studio, that kind of stuff, I was putting together all of the music for this game, and I only made about like 7 or 8 tracks for it, which I ended up feeling wasn't enough. Even 20 wouldn't have been enough, I think, for a game of this size and scope, and all that kind of stuff. So I started like licensing music from other sources. Turns out it's not really that expensive for this kind of a project, depending on where you go for it. Ready-made tracks, stuff that some of it works for the game, some of it I ended up licensing music that wasn't really going to be very useful. You can get access to all this stuff if you want and check it out on, for example, there's websites out there that you can search this for, but a number of the music packs came from like Steam, because they have that kind of stuff on there now associated with the Steam engine. Some occasions you're only going to hear this kind of stuff, sort of an ambient background, birds, a woodpecker, sort of like nature sounds, because I'm not trying to push an emotion other than sort of being a peaceful location on the player. On other occasions, things are going to change. Other episodes of this series, you will hear the music going from scene to scene change. Also, like in one map, I may have the music change 2 or 3 times. So I'm using a lot of music tracks in this game, and it's really ballooning the file size. I'm hoping that doesn't become a problem later. But in some occasions, this simple ambient sound is good enough. Other times, we're going to actually need some music. So let's jump to a different portion of the game, or this jump to some part in the game by talking to this guy. Now here, much later on in the game, I'm not going to provide any context to what's going on here. So we'll just jump through all the dialogue, because that doesn't really matter at the moment. Now, these guys are stuck in a cave. They're trying to get from one side to the other. It's dark. They're running around. Oh, this place sucks. And the music is trying to reflect that. Or I'm trying to reflect that with the music. It is deep sounding, sounds kind of depressing. And it's kind of like giving the impression that, like, geez, they're not in any sort of immediate danger. But get away, I don't want to fight you. They're not in any kind of immediate danger. They're definitely not in a safe situation. It's the kind of thing I'm trying to convey here. That battle music was terrible. That's got to be changed for this portion of the game. And in total, really. Some of the maps not that this is really on topic, but some of the maps I have set up in this game are kind of small. Run, fools! The run, something I will mention, that the ability to run in this game is something I'm going to disable before the final version. That's why the maps are staying relatively small, so you can move from one side to the other while walking without it taking a long time. For debugging purposes, though, I'm keeping the run command in the game, so I can still move through the maps even faster to get from one section to another to debug certain portions. I do not want you bothering me, swamp monster. Why is there a swamp monster in the frickin' cave anyway? Wow. Did I run into some sort of a bug here? Is that something I gotta deal with? Zella should have walked forward, yet he stayed behind. Well, anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to say here, so thanks for watching, and see you next time.